Sarah Martinez stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her penthouse office, fighting back tears that threatened to smudge her carefully applied mascara. At 34, she had everything the world said she should want: a billion-dollar tech empire, designer clothes hanging in walk-in closets, and a Manhattan penthouse that graced magazine covers. Yet tonight, as she prepared for another blind date arranged by her well-meaning assistant, her heart felt as empty as the silent halls of her company after hours. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But the thought of sitting across from another investment banker or tech entrepreneur, discussing profit margins over expensive wine, made her stomach churn. 6-year-old Emma's tearful question from that morning echoed in her mind. "Mommy, why don't you ever smile like you used to with Daddy?" How could she explain to her daughter that success had come at the cost of joy? Sarah grabbed her Hermes bag and headed toward the elevator, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to disappointment. She'd promised herself this was the last blind date. If tonight was another disaster, she'd focus solely on Emma and forget about finding love altogether. The restaurant her assistant had chosen was surprisingly modest, a cozy Italian place in Brooklyn that Sarah had never heard of. As her driver pulled up to the curb, she noticed the warm, golden light spilling from the windows and couples sharing intimate conversations over checkered tablecloths. It felt more authentic than the Michelin-starred establishments, where she usually conducted business dinners. Inside, the hostess directed her to a corner table, where a man sat reading a worn, paperback novel. Sarah's steps slowed as she approached. This couldn't be right. The man looked up, revealing kind brown eyes and a gentle smile that reached every corner of his face. He wore a simple button-down shirt, slightly wrinkled, and his hands bore the honest calluses of manual work. "Sarah?" he asked, standing politely. "I'm Miguel Rodriguez." She forced a smile, her mind racing. There had to be some mistake. Her assistant knew her type: successful, polished, ambitious. This man, while undeniably handsome in a rugged way, looked like he'd never seen the inside of a boardroom. "Nice to meet you," she managed, accepting his firm handshake. As they settled into conversation, Sarah learned that Miguel worked as a night janitor at a local hospital. He talked about his job with surprising pride, describing how he ensured patients had clean, comfortable spaces during their most vulnerable moments. When she mentioned her daughter, his face lit up. "I have a daughter too," he said, pulling out a phone with a cracked screen to show her a photo. "Sophia's 8. She's my whole world." Sarah found herself drawn into Miguel's stories. He spoke about taking Sophia to free museum days, teaching her to paint with watercolors from the dollar store, and how they spent Saturday mornings volunteering at a local food bank. His face glowed when he described these simple moments, and Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, a longing she'd buried under years of corporate achievements. "What about you?" Miguel asked. "What do you do for work?" Sarah hesitated. Usually she'd launch into her elevator pitch about her company, watching as dollar signs appeared in her date's eyes. Instead, she found herself saying, "I run a business. But honestly, I'd rather hear more about Sophia. She sounds amazing." The evening flew by in a way Sarah hadn't experienced in years. Miguel was intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in her thoughts beyond her bank account. When she mentioned feeling disconnected from Emma lately, he didn't offer platitudes or judgment. Instead, he shared his own struggles as a single parent, working nights to provide while trying to be present during the day. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her," Miguel admitted quietly. Other parents pick their kids up in nice cars, take them on expensive vacations. "I worry Sophia will resent our limitations." "The fact that you worry about that tells me you're an incredible father," Sarah said, meaning every word. She thought about Emma's room full of expensive toys that lay untouched, while her daughter craved simple attention and bedtime stories. As the evening wound down, Miguel insisted on walking her to her car, despite the fact that it was clearly out of his way. When Sarah's driver stepped out of the sleek black sedan, she caught Miguel's surprised expression before he quickly masked it with a smile. "Thank you for tonight," he said simply. "I haven't enjoyed myself this much in, well, probably ever on a first date." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Me neither, actually." They exchanged numbers, and as Miguel disappeared into the subway station, Sarah sat in her car, feeling more alive than she had in months. But as Manhattan's glittering skyline came into view, reality crept back in. What was she thinking? They lived in completely different worlds. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself looking forward to Miguel's texts more than board meetings. Their conversations flowed naturally from parenting struggles to dreams for the future. When Sophia got sick and Miguel had to miss work, Sarah surprised herself by offering to help with medical bills, only to have Miguel politely decline. "I appreciate it, truly," he said during their phone call, "but I need to handle this myself. It's important to me that I provide for my daughter." His pride stung at first, but then Sarah realized how refreshing it was to meet someone who wasn't interested in her money. Every man she'd dated in recent years had seen her wealth as a bonus prize, not an obstacle to overcome. The turning point came 3 weeks later when Emma came down with a sudden fever. Sarah was in the middle of crucial acquisition negotiations when her daughter's school called. Panicked and torn between her responsibilities, she found herself calling Miguel without thinking. "I know this is crazy," she said, pacing her office, "but I don't know who else to ask. Emma's sick, and I can't leave this meeting and—" "Text me the school address," Miguel said without hesitation. "I'll pick her up and take her to my place. Sophia would love to meet her." When Sarah finally arrived at Miguel's modest apartment 4 hours later, she found Emma curled up on his couch, giggling weakly as Sophia performed an elaborate puppet show with kitchen utensils. Miguel appeared from the kitchen, carrying a steaming mug of his grandmother's special honey tea. "She's been asking for her mom," he said softly. But Sophia's been keeping her spirits up. Watching her daughter's genuine smile, the first real one Sarah had seen in months, broke something open inside her chest. Emma looked more content in this small, lived-in apartment than she ever did surrounded by luxury in their penthouse. "Miguel," Sarah whispered as Emma dozed off, "I need to tell you something about my business." She explained everything, her company, her wealth, her fear that people only saw her as a walking dollar sign. Miguel listened without judgment, occasionally nodding. "I was wondering why you always seemed so guarded," he admitted finally. "Like you were waiting for me to ask for something." "Aren't you going to?" Sarah asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. Miguel smiled, the same gentle expression that had captivated her on their first date. "Sarah, I've been falling for the woman who worries about her daughter, who listens to my stories about hospital patients, who texts me pictures of sunsets from her office window. Your money doesn't change any of that." The next morning, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible months earlier. She called her assistant and cleared her schedule. Instead of heading to the office, she spent the day with Miguel, Emma and Sophia at the zoo, buying overpriced cotton candy and riding the carousel until all 4 of them were dizzy with laughter. As she watched Miguel lift both girls onto the painted horses, adjusting Emma's helmet with the same careful attention he gave Sophia, Sarah felt the last of her walls crumble. Here was a man who measured wealth not in stock options or real estate portfolios, but in moments of joy, acts of service, and the depth of human connection. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the same Italian restaurant where they'd met. But this time the tables were pushed aside for dancing. Emma and Sophia, inseparable best friends now, served as flower girls while Miguel's grandmother, who had flown in from Puerto Rico, cried happy tears in the front row. "You know," Miguel whispered as they swayed to their first dance, "I never expected that blind date to change everything." Sarah smiled, thinking of the woman she'd been, successful but hollow, wealthy but poor in all the ways that mattered. "Neither did I, but sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places." As they danced, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Sarah finally understood what true wealth looked like. It wasn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the gentle way Miguel made her coffee each morning, in Emma's laughter echoing through their newly blended home, in Sophia's proud announcement that she now had 2 moms, and in the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful together. The Millionaire CEO had found her prince after all, not in a corner office or at a charity gala, but in the honest hands and kind heart of a man who had already been rich in all the ways that truly mattered.